Hello students, welcome to Legacy IS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a very interesting topic about world history. That is what caused United States to drop atomic bomb on the cities of Japan during the World War II. So we are going to discuss in details about this topic, the background in which all these developments had happened, the rationale behind the use of atomic bomb for the first time in the human history, and what has been its short-term and the long-term impact both on the Japan as well as the entire world. So we try to understand the background of this event. The decision to use the atomic bomb to attack the two cities of Japan, that is Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was taken effectively to end the World War II, and also it remains one of the most controversial decisions that has been taken in the human history. Conversely, when we talk about this particular decision, it was accepted and believed largely that in 1945 such use of atomic bomb became very necessary to end a very long and costly war, both from the financial point of view as well as from the point of view of the loss of human lives, both in USA as well as in the Japan. However, over the coming decades, over the intervening decades, there has been other interpretations of this decision. The rationale behind this decision has come into picture, and it was not so simple that only to end the World War II this atomic bomb was dropped. There were some other regions as well. So before understanding about this region, let us try to understand the American leadership in the years during and preceding the dropping of bomb. So as we know that it was during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt, the Manhattan Project was commissioned. The aim of Manhattan Project was to create such an American superweapon which will be fueled by an atomic reaction. Thus, in April 1945, when his successor came into power after Franklin Roosevelt, that time he was informed of momentous and extraordinarily secret project, that is Manhattan Project, and where the attempt was made to develop the first atomic bomb. And it was during this time, it was the Harry Truman who was the next president. So it was during the presidency of Harry Truman, Germany was nearly defeated. However, US was continuously fighting against Japan in what was considered to be an incredibly bloody war in the Pacific Ocean, especially two very major war that was fought in this overall war. Two major battles we can say that was fought during the Second World War. One was the Battle of Iwo Jima, and second was Battle of Okinawa. This battle was very bloody in nature, that in terms of the life that it claimed, both from the American side as well as the Japanese side. Also, it was during this time a new bomber by the name of B-29 bomber has already been developed, and thus Japan was being heavily bombed by the formation of these groups. Thus, despite suffering from such a heavy casualty, especially among the Japanese civilians who were killed mercilessly in the American incendiary bombing campaigns, Japanese government still was very intent on continuing the war at no matter what, because they have made this war as a matter of their national prestige. Especially the emperor of that time in Japan, Emperor Hirohito, he believed that the Japan will win this war, and thus he was continuously putting all the Japanese youth, or we can say Japanese soldiers, to fight against the Allied powers. Now, if you look at this on the map, as we have discussed, two major battles. One was the Battle of Iwo Jima. As you can see, it is a group of a small island slightly to the southeast of the main Japanese island. And the second battle, again, here we have the Okinawa, that is situated slightly to the south of the main Japan island. It was during these two battles that American soldiers had fought very valiantly and were able to capture both these islands in a short span of time. So when Harry Truman came into power, somewhere in the spring of 1945, Truman and his military advisors had two options to determine the course of the war. First, that US should continue to fight a prolonged war against Japanese in the same way, and then in result they can expect and probably hope that at one point of time when they capture all the smaller islands around Japan, they will have no other option but to invade the Japanese home island somewhere in the late 1945 maybe, and perhaps then the fight can continue even into the 1946 on the mainland Japan. The second option these people had is to continue working on acquiring a functional atomic bomb that was the part of the Project Manhattan, and thus by using this atomic bomb in the near future, we can try to end the war. And the result obviously will be much more devastating, because such devastating attacks, if it is carried out in any city of Japan, will cause a lot of human casualty, especially civilian casualties. However, on the positive end, there is a high possibility of the war to end once this kind of atomic weapon was used. So these were the two options that were being discussed among the advisors and among the president, among the advisors, both military as well as we can say presidential advisor. Now, the question comes, was there a debate in the US public or US Congress related to the, we can say, bombing of the Japan with atomic bomb? The answer is no. There actually was no debate in the Congress or among the American public. And why it is so? The reason is very, very simple. As far as the US Congress is concerned, Project Manhattan was a very clandestine kind of project, and the many members of US Congress were not aware of existence of such kind of project. Even President Truman, he was made aware of this project once he hold the helm of presidency of the United States. Similarly, if you talk about the public in general, public also did not have any inkling, did not have any kind of indication that such a weapon could be developed which could end the war in a near term in the horizon. However, there was discussion going on among the close-knit scientific community, circle of scientists, especially those scientists who were directly involved in the Project Manhattan. And one of the most notable scientists in this circle was Leo Szilard, who was a Hungarian migrant who migrated to the United States of America, and he was one of the scientists, apart from Robert Oppenheimer and all other scientists such as Enrico Fermi, who played a very active role in development of atomic weapons. And the reason behind this was very, very simple. Leo Szilard and all his scientific, we can say, computer scientists believe that the Germany is trying to develop atomic weapons, and before Germany can develop atomic weapon, it is very, very essential for the United States actually to develop the atomic weapon and use it on Germany. Thus, if you look at the viewpoint of these scientists, they considered Nazi Germany to be a legitimate target if US ever had to use this atomic bomb or atomic weapon. However, if we talk about Japan, we know that Japan did not attempted or were trying to develop its own atomic weapons, and thus whether the atomic weapons should be used on Japan directly or not, they were not very much convinced about this. And thus, in the year 1945, somewhere in the month of May, James Frank, one other scientist, and the Leo Szilard, the Hungarian physicist, they appealed to the Henry Stimson, who was at that time Secretary of State, and they said that bomb should not be used, atomic bomb more precisely, should not be used against Japan, at least without warning, and also before actually attacking Japan with atomic bomb, there should be a demonstration explosion. Now, what is the aim of this demonstration explosion? They said that demonstration explosion should be arranged so that Japanese leadership can see this explosion and could understand the threat that the atomic weapons poses, and this might act as a deterrent, and Japanese can try to then come to the negotiating table to end the World War II. However, the arguments of both James Frank and Leo Szilard was largely ignored by the administration of Harry Truman. So basically, the reason was very, very simple, because if you talk about the Truman administration as well as the military advisors, the militaries at that time, their viewpoint was quite clear. And the viewpoint was that if the atomic bomb could shorten the war, if the use of atomic bomb could shorten the duration of war, could bring the Japan to the negotiating table, could help in facilitating the Japanese surrender, it should be used anyway. And thus, the only question was how and when to use. And in this regard, then the President Truman formed a committee that is called as the Interim Committee. This Interim Committee consisted of several individuals who were government officials, military officers, scientists, and even some PR experts. And the main objective of this committee was to decide how the bomb and where the bomb has to be used. That means both the time as well as the target of the atom. So when these committee finally deliberated, and finally when they sent the proposal to the presidential office, they said that the military industrial facilities is the most vital target that should be targeted by the atomic bomb, and this will cripple Japan's war related industries and can bring Japan to the knee. However, they also understood that there will be presence of civilians in the target because most of the military industrial facility of Japan was actually situated in a city region. That means we can say within the periphery of the cities, or sometimes even in the administrative region of the cities. And thus, it was not unusual to have civilian casualties in the context of war, and this was also not the first time that civilians could have become casualty of the atomic bomb. Many thousands of civilians had earlier died as well in the Allied bombing of Germany in the Europe, and the firebombing campaign against Japan that occurred in the early 1945 also had claimed lives of thousands of innocent people. Actually, 500,000 Japanese civilians were killed overall in the past 2 to 3 years by the bombing of the Japan. So at that point of time, the interim committee and the administration was not so much concerned about the civilian casualty as a direct or indirect result of the atomic bomb. Now, when all this process, all these discussions, deliberation were going on, there had been some significant events that preceded the actual bombing. One of the most important of them was what we call as Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference was organized in the in the June 8, 1945, and in this Yalta Conference, there was participation of Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of UK at that time. We have Roosevelt, who was the President of the United States of America, and Joseph Stalin, who was that time the chairman of the Soviet Committee, or we can say overall he was the chairman of the Soviet Union. So in this conference, Stalin earlier had agreed that Soviet Union would attack Japan 3 months after the surrender of Germany, and thus, as Germany had surrendered already on 8th of May 1945, that placed Soviet Union's entry into the Pacific War August 8, 1945. So on 8 August 1945, if atomic bombs would not have used, then Soviet Union would also have entered the war from the Allied side, and then Japan would have faced an assault by both US as well as the Soviet Union, one from the west, one from the east. However, once Harry Truman became president, another conference was held again. From UK, it was the Winston Churchill, and from USSR, it was the Joseph Stalin. And in this Potsdam conference, Harry Truman had a very big concern. And what was that concern? The concern was that Soviet Union and Japan are not at the war, because the Soviet Union and Japan already had signed a non-aggression pact years earlier, and the Soviet Union will only enter war on 8th of August 1945. That was the predetermined date, 3 months after the we can say surrender of Germany. However, at that time, Harry Truman and overall American administration was very, very wary of the Soviet intentions if it participated or get involved in the Japanese war. And basically, what was happening once we know that the war in Europe was over after the surrender of Germany, Russians were acquiring very quick influence over the Eastern Europe, that in the future would lead to development of the Warsaw Pact. And also, as we know, the very common phrase that is used is the descent of Iron Curtain over the Eastern Europe. Thus, there was a great interest in the American administration to prevent such kind of influence or expansion of Soviets into the Asian part as well. And Truman, in this context, knew that if the atomic bomb actually worked, and then it could lead to possible end of the war. Thus, Russia will never join the war, will never have the opportunity to join the war against Japan, and thus in the Asia, Russian expansion could be stopped. And in this context, when he was participating in the Potsdam conference, he got finally the confirmation that atomic bomb and its test had become successful. And thus, in the concluding statement, when he had a brief conversation with the Joseph Stalin, he said that, "Believe me, Japs," referring to the Japanese, "will fold up before Russia comes in. I am sure they will when Manhattan," referring to the Manhattan Project, which many people at that time thought that he is referring to the Manhattan's region of New York, "appears over their homeland." So this was a kind of indication that was given by the statement Truman that he is willing to very soon deploy the atomic bombs on the cities of Japan. So once the Potsdam conference concluded, United States along with Allied issued a call for unconditional surrender of Japan. And in this regard, on 26th of July 1945, finally when the draft of Potsdam Declaration was released, it was written that United States, Great Britain, and the Republic of China. Obviously, the Republic of China was at that time participating in war from the Allied side, because Japan was trying to capture and try to colonize China during the World War II. So US, Great Britain, and the Republic of China argued that Japan's position is futile in this present context, and its armed forces should surrender unconditionally. And if Japan did not agree to this, then the alternative will be very, very bad, because it will lead to prompt and utter destruction of Japan. However, there has been no specific mention of the atomic bomb. And obviously, it was because though United States and President Truman was convinced that they will use the atomic bomb, other allied partners were not aware of that plan. And in this regard, further, when the Japan declared that they will not surrender to the allied forces, first bomb was dropped in the city of Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945. And as a result of this, the destruction was enormous, but still the Emperor Hirohito was not willing to surrender, and Japan still did not appear willing to surrender. The President Truman then announced the use of atomic bomb and issued a warning to the Japanese on the radio that more atomic bombs could be used against their homeland if the Japan did not surrender. However, the government still continued to reject calls to the surrender, and thus 3 days later, on the morning of August 9th, 1945, the second atomic bomb was dropped over the city of Nagasaki. Now, there are various interpretations and discussion among the intelligentsia that whether this dropping of the second atomic bomb is necessary or not. It is very debatable because many experts believe that if US had waited some more time, then Japanese government could have understood the kind of catastrophe the atomic bombs had caused in the Hiroshima, and then later on they might have been convinced to surrender without even the use of second atomic. So that is the something that historians still continue to discuss and deliberate upon. Now, if you look at the code that was used for the atomic bomb, first atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima was Little Boy. It was uranium-235. The bomb actually worked on the fission of uranium-235, having a weight of 4,400 kgs and with a power of explosive power of, we can say, 15,000 tons of TNT, that is trinitrotoluene, a very important, very well-known explosive. The second bomb that was dropped in Nagasaki was Fat Man. This was based on the fission of plutonium-239 with a slightly higher weight of 4.5 tons, and it was having a much greater power of 21 thousands of TNT. And this was the bomber B-29 bomber that was used by USA to drop these two bombs. Now, the controversy regarding this decision is various. For example, many people doubt that what was the rationale behind the use of such weapon, and the conventional wisdom states that the need of the atomic bomb was filled because there was urgent need to end the war quickly, and thus, though it has caused catastrophic loss of life, especially the civilian casualties were enormous due to the use of this atomic bomb. If we try to understand if war could have dragged on for a couple of more years, the people agree, and people believe, many military historians even believe, that it would have caused much more greater loss of. Similarly, another kind of debate emerged somewhere in the mid-1990s when the Cold War was going on between the US and Soviet Union, that many scientists, political scientists we can say, they agreed that only ending the war was not the reason behind the atomic bombing of the Japan. It was also the part of the American strategy to contain the Soviet sphere of influence, to contain the Soviet Union from further expanding toward the east, including Japan. And if you look at the overall approach of the US administration, even after so long time after the bombing of Japan, still no US president has apologized for such catastrophic event. And in this context, if you look at the stand of US president, if you look at the statement that was given by former US President Bill Clinton, he said that United States owes no apology to Japan for the atomic bombs, and same argument was given that atomic bombs had ended the war, and in longer term it had led to saving the lives of the American soldiers, American citizens. And more or less same line of approach has been followed by the US president before and even after that, leading all the way up to the current president Joe Biden. So that is all about this particular issue. I hope you understood overall all the events, conferences, and different we can say themes that were running concurrently with the bombing of the Japan, the atomic bombing of Japan. No doubt, it remains one of the most black pages, one of the most black, we can say, event in the human history. And that is all for this particular video. I hope if you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, as well as subscribe to our channel for more content. Thank you very much.